How does a civilization that conquered the known world slowly crumble into dust? Tonight, let the epic saga of Rome guide you into a deep slumber. We will drift from its humble origins beside a winding river, through an era of monumental architecture, all the way to its tragic decline. Before we begin our journey through the centuries, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment to tell me where in the world you are resting tonight. Now, turn down your lamps, allow your surroundings to fade, and let the quiet wash over you as we step back in time. Long before the gleam of white marble defined the landscape, the banks of the Tiber River sat in serene stillness around 3,000 years ago. Scattered along the hillsides were simple, rounded dwellings, crafted from earth, timber, and straw, with steep, thatched roofs to shed the heavy rain. Modern excavations on the Palatine Hill have revealed the ghosts of these homes: hollowed postmarks, broken ceramics, and the soot of ancient hearths. The steady flow of the river dictated their days, offering a bounty of fish and a vital trade route connecting the northern and southern lands. Perched safely above the floodplains, the famous Seven Hills provided fertile ground and defense, each supporting its own distinct, blossoming community. These ancient settlers lived by the rhythm of the seasons, with men driving oxen to carve deep furrows into the rich earth. Meanwhile, the comforting scent of freshly baked bread filled the air as women worked the grinding stones and children fetched firewood from nearby thickets. They shared this territory with the Sabines and Etruscans, diverse tribes that brought their own unique traditions and challenges to the region. A profound sense of the divine connected these early Latins, who saw sacred spirits dwelling in the river's current and the warmth of their own hearths. Underneath a canopy of stars, they offered simple gifts of wine and grain at wooden altars, establishing a deep reverence that would shape Rome forever. It was here they whispered legends of Aeneas, a hero fleeing the ashes of Troy with his father on his back, searching for a new destiny. Whether these ancient sagas were strictly true hardly mattered, as they forged a unified identity, paving the way for another legendary whispered tale. This famous myth spoke of abandoned twin boys nursed on the riverbank by a fierce she-wolf who would grow up to build an eternal metropolis. Beyond the myths, daily existence was driven by strict survival, with villagers wearing basic woolen garments dyed in natural shades of red and brown. Personal adornments were humble creations, carved from bone or bronze, while practical tools included rugged axes for clearing timber and clay pots for storage. Yet, this modest settlement wasn't completely isolated. Merchant trails brought sophisticated metalwork from the Etruscans and fresh ideas from southern Greek colonies. These foreign encounters gradually refined the local Latins, expanding their worldview and silently arming them for a magnificent, unforeseen future. Of course, their tranquility was frequently shattered by petty disputes over grazing lands or water, sparking violent neighborhood clashes with simple spears and rough shields. Out of these small-scale territorial wars, the earliest seeds of order were planted as respected elders stepped in to deliver binding judgments. This unwritten understanding that bloody arguments could be settled through communal agreement formed the very bedrock of what would eventually become famous Roman law. These humble people couldn't foresee the coming empire, yet their home at the intersection of bustling trade routes and mighty rivers gave them immense leverage. All these cultural threads culminated in 753 BCE, when, according to lore, Romulus carved a deep trench in the dirt to define his new city. When his twin brother Remus sneeringly jumped over this sacred boundary, Romulus struck him dead, vowing that any invader would meet the same bloody fate. As the first monarch, Romulus transformed his fledgling stronghold into a sanctuary for outcasts and runaway slaves, fusing diverse wanderers into a single, fierce population. This early monarchy spanned over 200 years, heavily shaped by its second ruler, Numa Pompilius, who shifted the city's focus toward profound peace. Numa established revered priesthoods, organized sacred festivals, and built the famous Temple of Janus,
cementing an enduring spiritual devotion before the third king arose.
Breaking the era of peace, Rome's third ruler, Tullus Hostilius, plunged the city back into the brutal fires of war. He spearheaded the conquest of Alba Longa, a conflict famously settled by a lethal duel between two sets of triplet warriors. Following Alba Longa's defeat, its people were relocated to Rome, cementing a vital tradition of weaving conquered foes into the citizenry. The fourth monarch, Ancus Marcius, tempered this aggression by constructing the first bridge across the Tiber, firmly anchoring Rome to its surroundings. He also established the coastal port of Ostia, extending the growing city's reach outward and claiming vital access to the sea. Etruscan influence arrived with the fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus, who doubled the Senate's size and commissioned the grand Circus Maximus for entertainment. Priscus also initiated the Cloaca Maxima, massive sewers that drained the marshy valleys and laid the physical groundwork for the Roman Forum. Taking the throne next, Servius Tullius revolutionized the city's governance by launching the first census, organizing the population entirely by wealth. This restructuring shaped the military and empowered the common plebeians, while Servius simultaneously expanded the sacred Pomerium to encompass new hills. The regal era crashed to a violent halt under Tarquinius Superbus, a cruel tyrant whose grand building projects were overshadowed by arrogance. When the king's son viciously wronged a noblewoman named Lucretia, her tragic despair ignited a furious rebellion among the patrician families. By 509 BCE, the outraged nobles expelled the Tarquins completely, swearing a fierce oath that no monarch would ever rule them again. From this resounding demand for liberty emerged the Roman Republic, an innovative system designed to actively share and restrict political power. During these centuries of kings, Rome had evolved from a scattered cluster of wooden huts into a formidable, well-governed stone metropolis. As the shadows of the monarchy faded into legend, the resilient citizens stood at the dawn of a challenging new republican destiny. Replacing the ousted tyrant, a fresh political framework emerged, where authority was deliberately fractured among magistrates, councils, and a watchful senate. At the core of this transformation were two consuls, elected annually with identical authority, ensuring neither could dominate the other. This delicate arrangement solidified a defining Roman philosophy. Absolute control was banished, and freedom would be guarded by strict laws, not royal whims. However, this newfound liberty favored only the aristocratic patricians, leaving the working-class plebeians to shoulder the grueling burdens of conflict and toil. Amidst these brewing social tensions, Rome faced immediate external peril, as neighboring tribes eyed the young republic, eager to exploit its internal fractures. Skirmishes erupted just outside the city walls, constantly forcing ordinary farmers to drop their plows at dawn and frantically grab their shield. To survive, Rome relied on a citizen militia sorted by wealth, where affluent men rode horses while poorer soldiers fought with simple slings. Despite the crushing exhaustion of continuous warfare, these shared campaigns united the populace in a fierce defense of their newly won republican freedom. Inside the bustling city, a drained marsh transformed into the vibrant Forum, pulsating with lively trade, public decrees, and tales of battlefield triumphs. Looming over this civic center was the majestic Temple of Jupiter, finally completed as a towering testament to Rome's unwavering reliance on divine favor. It kept sacred flames burning, and augurs deciphered the flights of birds, convinced that strict religious devotion was the true source of military strength. Yet beneath this cloak of unified piety and military might, the bitter resentment of the exhausted plebeians was rapidly approaching a boiling point. Tired of bleeding for a state that silenced them, the commoners issued a devastating ultimatum, threatening to abandon Rome and leave it entirely undefended. Terrified of losing their workforce and army, the elites finally conceded, establishing the tribune of the plebs to champion the rights of ordinary citizens. These new representatives stood as a vital safeguard against patrician abuse, armed with the extraordinary power to halt any unjust legislation with a single veto. Following this compromise, another breakthrough emerged around 450 BCE, when Rome's first public laws were inscribed upon 12 bronze tablets. Although these codes permitted brutal punishments and enforced rigid social tiers, they shattered the elite's absolute control over legal matters. Yet, the young state faced severe external pressures as well, especially when the exiled King Tarquin rallied Etruscan forces to reclaim his throne. During these desperate conflicts, legendary figures arose, such as Horatius defending a crumbling bridge, or brave Cloelia guiding captives across the rushing Tiber. Whether these incredible feats were strict history or embellished myth, they provided future generations with ultimate standards of personal sacrifice. Just as stability seemed possible, an unprecedented disaster struck in 390 BCE, when fierce Gallic warriors stormed southward across the Alps. The Roman legions crumbled at the Allia River, leaving their beloved city utterly defenseless as the invading horde breached the unguarded gates. Invaders set the civic heart ablaze, leaving only a desperate group of defenders barricaded high upon the Capitoline Hill to resist the onslaught. According to folklore, it was the frantic honking of sacred geese that alerted the exhausted garrison to a midnight ambush, preventing total annihilation. Ultimately, survival required a humiliating surrender, forcing the citizens to purchase the withdrawal of the Gauls with vast sums of gold. The barbaric chieftain hurled his heavy sword onto the weighing scales, mocking the defeated Romans by proclaiming that woe belongs to the conquered. That stinging insult became a permanent scar on their collective psyche, yet it surprisingly galvanized the fractured populace instead of breaking their spirit. Emerging from the smoking ruins, a hardened citizenry began the arduous task of reconstructing their shattered homes and fortifying the defensive perimeter. These early centuries of surviving internal strife, royal tyranny, and foreign devastation ultimately forged the unyielding character of the early republic, swearing a solemn oath that their homeland would never again suffer such degradation. The survivors channeled their immense grief into an unbreakable resolve. True to their vow, they replaced charred debris with solid rock, erecting massive ramparts and reinforcing their city gates with heavy iron. Yet peace remained elusive, as this budding power found itself continually besieged by rival tribes and fierce neighboring factions. Season after season, ordinary farmers were summoned from their crops, trading their agricultural tools for heavy shields and thrusting spears. To survive these clashes, their rigid infantry lines transformed into highly adaptable, disciplined tactical units, capable of navigating treacherous battlefields. Though these extended campaigns placed a heavy burden on families back home, every triumph secured vital territory and solidified their regional supremacy. Their former cultural mentors to the north soon became bitter adversaries, culminating in a prolonged siege that ultimately broke their proud rivals. Absorbing these vast northern lands effectively doubled their domain, signaling a crucial pivot from mere self-defense toward aggressive territorial growth. Rather than simply crushing the defeated, they demonstrated a unique genius for weaving these conquered communities into their own societal fabric. By offering varying degrees of citizenship and forging loyal treaties, they constructed a vast network of dedicated allies invested in their shared future. This growing confederation faced its ultimate trial against rugged mountain warriors from the south, who fought with unmatched ferocity and tactical brilliance. The grueling conflict brought devastating setbacks, including a notorious ambush that forced trapped legionaries to suffer the agonizing indignity of passing under an enemy yoke. Refusing to yield, they absorbed these painful lessons, eventually crushing the Highlanders and integrating their territory into a rapidly expanding domain. Meanwhile, within the city walls, a parallel struggle unfolded as the commoners fiercely campaigned for a voice against the entrenched aristocracy. Decades of relentless pressure finally shattered the glass ceiling, granting the lower classes access to the highest magisterial offices and sacred priesthoods. Instead of tearing the state apart, these hard-fought compromises forged an incredibly durable political system,
while the bustling forum thrived with renewed commerce. Public bronze tablets displayed the statutes, while devout citizens sought divine favor, believing their triumphs stemmed equally from piety and sharpened iron.
By 264 BCE, the once scorched settlement had risen from the ashes to become the undisputed overlord of the entire Italian peninsula. Paved highways knitted the rugged landscape together, and expanding settlements planted the Republic's language and traditions deep into newly subdued territories. With the mainland firmly secured, the Republic cast its ambitious gaze across the Mediterranean waves, spotting a formidable rival on the horizon. Situated on the North African shoreline, Carthage was a majestic metropolis founded by ancient Phoenician merchants, thriving on global commerce. While the Italians relied on unyielding infantry, this North African juggernaut commanded the oceans with immense wealth and an unmatched armada. The mounting friction between these two expanding titans made a collision inevitable, sparking a multi-generational conflict known as the Punic Wars. This monumental struggle ignited over Sicily, a lush, highly sought-after island that became the initial battleground of a grueling military campaign. Lacking any real maritime experience, the desperate Republic rapidly constructed massive warships from native timber, copying the designs of captured enemy vessels. They ingeniously engineered the corvus, a spiked boarding ramp that effectively transformed chaotic naval skirmishes into brutal hand-to-hand combat on the decks. For over 20 years, the maritime conflict seesawed wildly, with glorious triumphs matched only by catastrophic tempests that devoured entire armadas. Eventually, the exhausted North African Empire capitulated, surrendering the contested island to their steadfast Italian rivals in 241 BCE. Acquiring this fertile territory marked a monumental milestone, transforming the land-bound Republic into a legitimate, formidable superpower across the Mediterranean Sea. Yet the hard-won tranquility was shattered mere decades later, when Carthage's most brilliant commander, Hannibal Barca, initiated a daring new offensive. Leading a massive host, he embarked on a legendary trek from Spain, pushing through treacherous Gaul and over the freezing, snow-capped Alps. For over a decade, this brilliant tactician ravaged the Italian peninsula, delivering a devastating blow at Cannae, where tens of thousands of legionaries perished. The sheer scale of the slaughter sent shockwaves of terror through the Republic, prompting several allies to abandon the seemingly doomed cause. Yet, in their darkest hour, the Senate outright rejected peace talks, aggressively drafting new troops, including youths and the enslaved, to keep fighting. This unbreakable resolve eventually paid off when a visionary general named Scipio took command, shifting the theater of war directly to enemy soil. In 202 BCE, Scipio clashed with Hannibal at Zama, utilizing superior discipline and allied cavalry to finally shatter the invaders' forces. With this monumental victory, the Republic claimed supremacy over the Western Mediterranean, forcing the once undefeated commander to flee his homeland forever. Decades passed, but deep-seated paranoia lingered, heavily fueled by influential senators constantly demanding that their ancient rival be entirely eradicated. Yielding to these relentless calls for destruction, Roman legions blockaded the recovering city, strangling its crucial trade routes and supply lines. The trapped inhabitants mounted a fiercely desperate defense for 3 agonizing years before the formidable besiegers finally breached the outer walls. Raging infernos devoured temples and homes, while the surviving populace was mercilessly condemned to chains and lifelong servitude. Legend claims the conquerors even salted the scorched earth, ensuring the once mighty Queen of the Seas was erased from existence entirely. This absolute triumph brought unimaginable riches pouring into the capital. Yet this newfound wealth sowed dangerous seeds of severe social inequality. Elite landowners expanded their massive estates using captive labor, while ordinary citizen farmers were systematically pushed to the absolute brink of ruin. The very conflicts that elevated the nation to global dominance ultimately birthed an insatiable greed and brewing internal discord. As twilight fell over the smoldering ruins of their greatest enemy,
Romans believed their empire was eternal, entirely blind to the impending storms within.